And we're live. Quick false error on starting there. Let me just kick off Instagram as well, which always takes longer to go live. So welcome if you are joining me now. Here we go, and Instagram is going as well. Perfect. So welcome to Menopause Week. This is a live Q&A kicking off my week of Menopause Week that I'm running all this week. If you are live, please just give me a shout, give me a wave so I know people are there. Brilliant to see you. So I will quickly introduce myself and then I'll tell you a bit more about what we're up to today. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lucy. I'm, I think, the UK's first and I think the UK's only mental health and exercise and triathlon coach. I'm probably equally passionate about both triathlon and mental health and exercise. So I coach individuals and one-to-one, coach individuals on a one-to-one basis, and I work with club triathletes as well at all levels. So working on people training for their first triathlon, their first marathon, up to Ironmans, ultras. I work at all different levels, supporting people to achieve their goals, and I race myself at those distances as well. So I've done age group, I've done Ironman, I've done ultra cycling, I haven't done ultra marathon racing, ultra running. And as I say, I'm just as passionate about the mental health side as the triathlon side. So I'm also a life coach, and I'm really want to support my clients to make sure they get the mental health benefits from exercise, as well as working to overcome the barriers that our mind can often put in the way of us doing that exercise. So maybe worries that we need to be faster, worries about others, worries about body image, all the things that can stop us from exercising, and helping my clients break those down. And I'm also I am also a personal trainer, and I'm really passionate about helping women particularly to build strength training into their week to help them reduce injuries, to help them reduce some of the negative impacts of menopause, which we'll be talking about today, and also because I believe that strength training can be really fun. This live launch event today is the first in a series of events I'm running all this week. So free events to help try and give you the answers and the support that you need to stay active and to get the most out of your training through menopause. There's a whole load of events going on this week. So if I can make the tech work, I will pop up a slide there. So if you want to join me for the rest of the week, you need to register for the rest of the week. You can either, if you're able to see that QR code right now and scan it, you can sign up for the rest of the week there, or there's the URL as well, which I will pop up. There we go. I'll get rid of that so you can see me again. So join me for the rest of the week. If you join me for the rest of the week, we're going into all the issues I'm going to be talking about today in a lot more detail. We will be looking at nutrition, we'll be looking at training, and we'll be looking at nutrition, training, and recovery. So how we actually recover, rest, get the sleep that we so really struggle with during menopause. So we'll be looking at all of that in more detail throughout the week. Sorry, there's a police car going past with lots of flashing lights outside. If you register for the week, you'll also get a chance to enter a draw to get loads of great coaching prizes. So I'm going to be giving away a code word in each of the sessions throughout the week. If you listen throughout the week and get those code words, then you can enter the prize draw to get loads of different coaching prizes from me. And I'll also be, those of you who register, you'll be getting emails from me throughout the week where I'll be giving you some special offers for working with me, which I've got coming up. If you're registered for Menopause Week, you'll get priority access to those offers. But mostly you'll get the content from the week. So let's kick off with the Q&A. I've got loads of questions that people have sent in advance. So thank you so much, those of you who have sent me those questions in advance. If you have other questions coming in, please do send them in. I'm hoping that I can see where all the different comments are coming in. If anybody's on Instagram now, can you just pop a comment in just so I can see that I can see it? So you can just say hello or something. I think I'm seeing the ones coming in from other places. But I will kick off with the questions I've got in advance. Now, just to say the answers to these questions, this is a Q&A. I'm going to be keeping things simple. There's lots more time to go into more depth on some of these issues. Thank you, Alice. I got that. Brilliant. Thank you. And all the rest of you, thank you. So there's loads more options to go into more depth throughout the rest of the week. So this is a kind of scratching the surface, and then we'll go into more depth as I go through the rest of the week. So do join me, as I say, for the rest of the week. If you have questions, pop them into the messaging, whichever app you're viewing on. I think I'm hopefully live on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Facebook right now. So there's obviously different ways of doing it in each of those apps. But if you send me those comments through, then hopefully I'll see them coming through. But I will kick off first with the ones that I've got in advance. Hello, thank you. Hey, Anya, good to see you. So Camilla asked, I think I got to the perimenopause stage, but I'm not sure. How do I know and what do I do? And this is so common. I think this stat is probably, I hope, is out of date by now. Not well. So the stat is that 80% of women get symptoms of menopause, 25% of women get severe symptoms. That I don't think will have changed. The stat that I hope is changing is that 80% of women don't realize those symptoms are menopause. So there's so many symptoms. I'm not going to go through them all now. As I say, I'll go through them more in the menopause week tomorrow, in the session tomorrow. But there are so many symptoms. What I would advise is partly knowing your age. So the average age of menopause is 51. Menopause is the point at which we haven't had periods for a year. But the stage before that, perimenopause, can last, it's 4 years on average. It can be over 10 years though. So we can be experiencing those symptoms way before the age of 51. So normally kind of mid 40s is the time when we would expect symptoms to start showing up. It could be before, it could be later. It could be severe, it could be much less severe. So what I would advise, and I advise this to all my female clients anyway, whatever age you are, is to track symptoms. Whether you do that in a notebook, whether you do it in an app, however you do it in the way that is easiest for you. In terms of what you're tracking, and particularly if you don't have a menstrual cycle, if you're on the coil or something, for example, if you don't have a menstrual cycle, then you haven't even got, the bleed to help you sort of figure out where in a cycle you are. So just write down everything. So things like mood, energy, if you have a menstrual cycle, flow, not just the dates, but how heavy it is, symptoms you get alongside that, your cramps and everything, changes in sleep, changes in aches and pains, maybe stomach discomfort, so many different things, all the things that we think of as the symptoms of menopause. Track them. And you may or may not see a pattern. Part of the joy of menopause is that it's very erratic. So there's not necessarily a pattern to it. It's not necessarily this will happen every month. I don't have a cycle because I'm on the coil, but for example, I know that sometimes, not always because it's different each time, but sometimes, for example, the first thing I'll notice is my boobs are a bit sorer than normal. And then I notice other things from there. So you might get a kind of an indicator symptom that shows you things are kicking off. It might not be like that, but track everything. That is going to help you to see if things are changing. And that's why I say to start tracking way before you get to menopausal age so that you can see that difference. So track everything, track before you get to menopause. If you haven't already started tracking, track anyway. That's going to help you to see if things are changing. It's also going to mean if and when you do go to see a GP, you've got something to show them because it's changing. It used to be really hard to get support from the GP. Not all GPs, some GPs are absolutely amazing, but they used to be not a good enough level of awareness amongst GPs. That is massively changing now. But the more evidence you have to show them that you can say, this is how I was before, and this is how I am now, something has changed, the more likely they are to be able to support you. Now, in terms of what do you need to do and what support are you asking for, I'll come into that more on the next question on HRT. You may not want HRT. You don't have to get menopause diagnosed. The reason for getting it diagnosed, and it's diagnosed by symptoms rather than a test as such, but the reason you might want to know is A, if you want some support from the doctor, whether it's HRT, whether it's CBT, whether it's other things, but also so you can support yourself. If you understand why you're experiencing changes, you can be kinder to yourself. It's not about having an excuse, but it's supporting yourself to get the best out of yourself. So I would definitely, it helps to know so that you can start making those adjustments in your own life. But also some of those symptoms can be symptoms of other things. So it's worth, if they are particularly severe or whatever, it's definitely worth going to the doctor and just ruling out that there's not something else causing it. So those are the reasons that I would recommend for tracking, for finding out. In terms of what you need to do, that's absolutely up to you. As I say, you can speak to the GP about different options, and I'll come on to that on the next question. In terms of whether the GP needs to do any tests, if you're of the age that you would expect to be in perimenopause or menopause, you don't need to be testing. So if you're of the age that they would expect you to be in perimenopause, they don't need to run blood tests. Your symptoms should be enough to tell the GP whether they think that you are, and therefore whether they would prescribe something based on that. Sorry, I lost my point a bit at the end there, but hopefully that makes sense. So the next question, which tallies nicely with that. So Carol asked, should I take HRT? I would always be careful whenever you have a should in what you're saying. Should I do something? Ask yourself why that word is there. So why do you feel you should? What is it that you want to achieve? And often a should comes because you feel some sort of external pressure. So number one, it's absolutely up to you as to whether you take it. So don't be taking it, don't feel that you should be because everybody else is on it, because it's a trendy new thing this year to be doing. I'm going to, and just another quick caveat, I will refer to HRT because that's what we tend to know it as in this country. I would strongly advocate that we should be calling it something more like menopausal hormonal therapy rather than HRT. We're not trying to replace our hormones. It's hormones to support us through the process we're going through. But because everybody knows it as HRT, I will stick with that. So in terms of whether you should take it, only if it's right for you, only if you want to. If you're getting some of the typical impacts of the menopause, and again, your GP can work with you on this, then you may well find that HRT will help you. There's other non-hormonal treatments as well. There's CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, which can really help with some of the issues in terms like the anxiety, the sleep. There's other prescription-based support, and there's herbal remedies as well, sort of varying evidence as to how successful they are, but a lot of people find them really useful. So there's lots of other options if you don't want to go down the hormonal route. A lot of people these days are turning to HRT because they've heard that it will help with things like heart disease and Alzheimer's. Again, speak to your GP. I'm not the expert here, but I'd say generally those things aren't proven yet. There's some evidence. One of the massive problems in terms of being a woman is there's far less research done on us. So we don't have the research to help us find the answers to all these things yet. There's some evidence showing it can help. It's not conclusive. So I wouldn't be taking it for those more long-term things. I would say you'd be taking the HRT, and your doctor would talk to you about this, but taking it for those more sort of immediate impacts that you're experiencing at the moment, the things like the hot flushes, the vasomotor symptoms of menopause. In terms of, again, your doctor would talk to you about this, but there are contraindications. So if you're over 60, if it's 10 years since you last had your period, i.e. since you reached menopause, if you're in a higher risk category for, so if you've got a hormone sensitive cancer like breast cancer, all of those things, you may find that HRT is not the right option for you, but again, speak to your GP. If you're experiencing early menopause, so if you're going through menopause either because it's surgically induced or because your body is just, you've gone through it earlier than other people might, then HRT is much more highly recommended in those cases, but speak to your GP. Okay, next question, and please do type in questions if you have them. I'm just scrolling through and having a quick look on here as well. I can't see any questions coming in yet, so shout now if they are. I'll keep on working through the ones I've got in advance. So Layla asked, is it my hormones that make me injured all the time, or is it a lack of strength, or both? And should I be asking for more HRT? So and I did a survey or asked people who were signed up for the menopause week what the symptoms they've been experiencing from menopause, and number one was fatigue, but joint issues I think came in the third most popular, not popular, but most common issue. So this is a really common issue, and I've definitely had my share of aches and injuries over the years. We experience more issues as we go through menopause because estrogen is protective of our joints in terms of the cartilage, the tendon, everything that makes up the joint, and also the muscles that surround the joints. As we go through menopause, estrogen declines, and so that support that we're getting for our joints, for our muscles, that all declines as well, which means we can be more vulnerable to injuries. There's also potentially increased pain sensitivity with the changing hormones as well. Again, speak to your GP, but I think it's unlikely that they would increase HRT just for injuries by itself. It tends not to be prescribed for that per se, but speak to your GP. But what I would say is there's loads of other things that we can be doing to try and prevent or reduce or minimize injuries. So number one, as we get older, whether we're male or female, but particularly as we're female, as we get that changing level of estrogen, our mobility starts to decrease. We get less range of motion at the joints. So doing more mobility work, both before we go out to do a run, to do some strength work or whatever, making sure we mobilize the joints. So doing some exercises which will mobilize the joints before we then go and put them under the pressure of running or strength work or whatever, but also to counteract everyday life. We spend most of our time, for example, seated. So our body, and I have a handy little person who can demonstrate this to me now. I used to always try and demonstrate this sort of myself. So we spend most of our time seated. Where is it? There. And then we want to go out for a run, and we're trying to get our leg to come right behind us to here. That is the exact opposite of what we've just spent all the time telling our body to do. Our body gets good at what we ask it to do, so it gets good at having our joints here, and then we say, no, I'd like you to come back here, or as I run with my leg coming behind me, obviously other leg going as well. We need to help our body do that because we're spending so much time telling it to be good at that closed angle. We now need to help it mobilize it into that open angle. So adding mobility work into our training, doing it every day if we need to get rid of that just general stiffness and everything just feels like it doesn't work. I would also add in stability training. So our body, whilst we need mobility at the joints, we also need stability at joints, particularly our hips, our shoulders, areas that we're particularly vulnerable to injuries as we go through menopause. So we want to stabilize the joints. Then we want to do strength work. As I said, as we lose estrogen through menopause, that estrogen is protective of our muscles, so we reduce our muscle mass. We need those muscles to support the joints. So we need to do strength training to try and maintain those muscles. All of those things I can go into in more detail. I'll be going into them in the session that we're doing tomorrow on exercise and training of menopause and training. So register for the week and you'll get the recording even if you can't attend live tomorrow. If you are getting injuries though, do see a physio. So I would always recommend, if you're getting an injury that isn't shifting, see a physio for specific recommendations for you. I can give you generalized recommendations, but if you've got a specific injury, you need somebody to assess what's actually going on at your level and give you exercises specific to that. And then alongside all of that kind of strength and conditioning side of things, we also need to look at our training. Are we building our training up steadily rather than getting overexcited and doing too much too soon? Are we building in enough time for recovery? And as we get into menopause, and again, I'll talk about this more tomorrow, but we need more time to allow our body to recover. So making sure that we're building in that time for recovery in our training plan. If you're interested in knowing more about how to do some of the exercises I talked about, the mobility, stability, and strength, I run a weekly strength and conditioning class, which is for everybody, but it's mostly women who do it. And I very much focus it on making sure that it is preparing women prior to menopause and during menopause. So all the exercises I would recommend we include in there in my Club Feel Fit sessions. You can find that on my website, feelfitwithlucy.co.uk/Club Feel Fit. If you sign up for Menopause Week, you'll be getting a special offer with a discount for that. So let me just check on questions again. I'm not seeing any. I hope that means that they're not coming in rather than I'm missing them. I've got yours, Sarah. I will answer that next. So that's good. I can see some questions are coming in. So Sarah has asked, any experience or do I know how to sift through separate symptoms that overlap? E.g., where there's a lack of motivation or mood or anxiety that could be due to depression or adrenal burnout rather than menopause. Tricky one. So I would say in that context, that tracking that I've been talking about, and I know this isn't going to help you, Sarah, but I'm answering in general terms for everybody else as well. If you've been tracking long term and you can see a change and you can see that change seems to occur around the time the age that you'll be expecting to be experiencing symptoms of menopause, then it's not telling you definitely, but it's a good clue. And again, it's so hard to tell how things have changed because every day, tweaks by a little bit. Whereas if we're tracking our mood, if we're tracking the things that Sarah said there, the mood, the anxiety, depression before, then we can see if things have changed afterwards. But in terms of how to actually diagnose and whether it's due to adrenal burnout or whatever, I would say that's something that I'm definitely not a specialist in, and I wouldn't want to claim to be. This is really unhelpful. I'm sorry, Sarah. I would be speaking to your GP or I'd be seeing a specialist in those areas. There's still things that you could be doing though, which would help, whether it is depression, whether it is adrenal burnout, or whether it's menopause. So in some things you need to know what it is so you can treat it specifically, but a lot of the things that I would talk about would be the same. So I'll be covering those in a little bit more depth in some of the questions I've got in. So I'll carry on those questions, and I'll be talking the final session, the session on Friday, where we're talking more about recovery, would be answering that in more detail. So I hope that helps. It's not 100% answer, sorry, Sarah, but hopefully it helps a bit with that. So I will go back to other questions. And this actually, Sarah, will help with that. But as I say, I'll go into more detail in the week. So Sharon asked, and as I said, this was the most common question I got, or common issue I got from people who signed up for the week. So Sharon asked how to manage overwhelming fatigue. So there's different potential causes of that fatigue, and we're all different and we're all experiencing different things. So some of these answers might not be relevant for you, some of them will be. But if we sort of fit things into, there's sleep, there's energy in general, and there's diet, and there's our training. So those are kind of 4 areas I'll address. In terms of sleep, a lot of people don't sleep well in menopause, whether that's because of hot flushes, whether that's because of anxiety, whether it's just because of disrupted sleep. But we often have issues with sleep during menopause. And this was a question a lot of people asked as well. Now, as soon as you talk about sleep, people go, well, I haven't got more time. I haven't got more time to add in more sleep into the day. Or I'm fine at getting to sleep, but then I wake up in the middle of the night. Some of the things that we can do to work on the quality rather than necessarily the hours of sleep that we get. And again, everybody's different. Listen to what might work for you. Not everything will work for you. We need to, in terms of the kind of sleep hygiene, sleep protocols, whatever, start at the beginning of the day. So what are you doing at the beginning of the day to help you set your circadian rhythm? So trying to get some daylight exposure as soon as possible in the morning is going to both help you set your circadian rhythm, so help you with your sleep. It's also really, really helpful in terms of depression as well, or overcoming depression. So those of you who have mood issues, getting that early morning daylight can make a massive difference. I know it's dark in the UK at the moment. You have to wait until it gets light. You can get the lamps, the special SAD lamps, seasonal affective disorder lamps. They can definitely help, and or getting out. Daylight outside is so much more powerful than through a window. So you need to get outdoors, but that also has a massive benefit in terms of mental health and energy, being outdoors, experiencing the natural world, so much evidence showing that that can help with mental health as well. So get in early morning daylight, trying to get some movement first thing, whether that's a full exercise regime, whether that's doing some mobility work, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of mobility, but getting some movement first thing. Then throughout the day, trying to make sure that we stop drinking coffee or caffeine if we drink it around midday, trying to make sure that we're creating some time to reduce stress throughout the day. So one of the most powerful ways when we feel the stress mounting is just to focus on our breathing, doing some nice, long, slow breaths out, relaxing the body, and not doing an, oh God, I've got to do that breathing thing like that, but really trying to just literally take a few minutes just to breathe deeply, relax the body as we breathe out. If we try and go to sleep and our body is just going like that and we haven't practiced having downtime for our brain, it's not surprising it's not very good at some downtime. So trying to almost practice allowing the brain to rest throughout the day and before we go to bed can make a real difference. And then as we prepare to go to bed, so things like having a phone curfew, maybe an hour before bed. So not looking at your phone an hour before bed. It's not just about the blue light. It's also about all the messages, the thoughts you've got going on to whatever you're reading. So having that phone curfew, try 30 minutes if an hour is too long, whatever it is. Try not to take the phone to bed with you. Try and leave the phone out of the room so you're not getting that temptation as well as you're not getting the light. Trying to, as I say, try and having a way to rest the brain before bed. So could you have a meditation app? I was going to say on your phone. I have a separate phone that is an old phone, that I don't use anymore, that I've deleted everything from except for a few meditation apps and things. I can have that by my bedside. I've got all the kind of making sure it's nice and dark in the middle of the night. But so I can use that for meditation if I wake up in the middle of the night or when I'm falling asleep. But it hasn't got the temptation of everything else that's on my real phone. So could you bring something like that in to help your brain relax before bed? Movement is really good for giving us energy. We think that, yes, we burn calories and that's burning energy when we move, but bringing movement into our day. So trying to introduce a movement practice depends where you are on that exercise scale. If you're not currently doing anything, doing a few minutes of mobility work a day, or getting out for a walk and appreciating the nature around you. All those things can make a massive difference in terms of mental health, can also help in terms of energy. Diet, we're going to talk about a lot more, but if you're craving energy, or sorry, if you're feeling fatigued and you end up turning to sugary foods, that's about the worst thing you can do. Your mind says it, your mind says, I need that sugar now to help me. But what happens is when you eat sugar, you get insulin released, which comes in and lowers your blood sugar levels. If you have a large amount of sugary food or refined sugar, refined carbs coming in one go, that's a big kind of hit. And so you get this rapid spike in insulin, get a brief burst in energy, but then we get this crash as the insulin brings the blood sugar back down again, which means we end up more tired than we were before. It also has health consequences in terms of long-term risks of things like coronary heart disease, type 2 diabetes, all of those sort of things, or your metabolic diseases. So it's not good for us on any level. But trying to resist the craving to eat sugary food and instead having things that will give us more sustained energy, which I'll come on to in a second, can actually help to keep that energy higher. Water is really important. So our brain is, I think, 75% water. Drinking enough water, which will then help that brain function more, helps to reduce fatigue. And then finally, and it depends where you are on that training scale as well, but a lot of people, we need more recovery. We need more time for rest as we go through menopause. Not everybody, but the vast majority of people and all the people I've worked with. If we're still trying to do the same training volume and not allowing for extra recovery time, that could be where that fatigue's coming from. So whether it's changing our goals or just training smarter, being cleverer about how we structure our week, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do less. Sometimes it does, but listening to your body better, and I'll be talking about this way more tomorrow, so that we're not getting too tired from our training itself. So I hope that helps on the energy issues and the managing fatigue. Again, we'll go into more detail on that. So if you register for the rest of the week, even if you can't join live, you'll be getting recordings of all the sessions, and I'll be talking way more about the training side of things tomorrow. Building on that question, so Sarah asked how to stop sugar cravings and fat around the middle. Lots of questions around sugar cravings and the belly fat that we are more vulnerable to through menopause. And Alicia asked the same things, but added into that. There's so much noise out there. We get told we need to cut this out, that out. We get told we should be fasting. We get told it's about the calorie deficit, and she's not sure what to try for the best. So in terms of cravings, and this is whether we're menopausal or not, but when you get a craving, try and be mindful about why that craving is there, why you want to eat. I'll say the sugar, but whatever it is you're craving, why is it that you want it? Usually it's an emotional reason. Maybe we're depressed, maybe we're bored, and we're lacking energy. So rather than just reaching for the thing, try and pause and add in that mindfulness as to why we want the thing that we're reaching for. And then ask if what you're reaching for is actually going to help. If you're reaching for it because you're upset about something, it's going to distract you from that. You might be happier while you eat the chocolate or whatever for a bit, but it's not actually solved the problem. So what else could you do? Could you do 5 minutes of journaling? Could you do 5 minutes of walking outside? However long it's going to take you to go and get that snack, could you do 5 minutes, which would actually help you in terms of whatever the emotion you're experiencing is more effectively? If it's boredom, can you have something like a kettlebell by your desk, and each time you feel that you're getting bored, do 10 kettlebell swings? Finding something else that's actually going to help you more to solve the problem, and realizing that the biscuit, whatever it is you're reaching for, isn't actually solving the problem. If it's energy, we've kind of covered that one already, but just to say again, whilst that energy, the cookie or whatever it is, might give you a short-term energy fix, it's actually making it longer in the long term, because you get the energy spike, then you get the crash afterwards, and you find yourself feeling more tired afterwards, and then you reach for another cookie, which you'll keep on getting the highs and lows. But as I say, long term, that is not good for your health. Long term, that's not good in terms of if you're gaining weight, but it's also not helping you in terms of that energy. So instead, having something which is going to give you a more sustained energy release, so things like protein-based snacks, which protein doesn't have that same high and low, and it gives you a more sustained energy release. Something with a bit more fat in it as well. We think fat's bad. Fat isn't bad. Fat, anything in moderation is fine, but that fat will give you a more sustained energy release as well. Or if you're having something sweet, make sure it's something with fiber in it, which again just slows down that energy release. So thinking in advance, because once we get the craving, we're going to reach for it. So in advance, thinking what could you have in your drawer, downstairs, wherever it is, but something that's going to be more protein-based, more fiber-based, which is going to give you a longer, slower release of energy, as well as the things I already said, like water and things. In terms of why we get the fat around the middle, I think it's not 100%, proven, accepted, but various different theories are that we know that as insulin increases, we need to release more of it for it to do its job. So that's where the insulin resistance comes in. And that's why we start putting on weight generally. In terms of why it's going around the middle, often it's related to stress. So if we're more stressed, our body goes into kind of, think back when we were living in caves or out in the prairies or whatever, and our body's like, oh my God, there's a stress. I need to make sure I'm safe for the future. So I'm going to hold on to some energy so I can get through this bad thing, particularly if that stress is coming from underfueling. So if you're underfueling, particularly if you're about to do some exercise and you're doing it fasted, that is massively stressful on your body, and your body goes, I haven't got enough energy. She wants me to go and do all this exercise and I haven't got enough energy, so I'm going to hold on to what I've got, and it stores it around the middle. We have more fat receptors, more cortisol receptors around the midsection as well, which might be another reason why it's stored around the middle. Doesn't really matter why it is. We want to know what we can do about it. So number one, please, 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 I hope there's nobody still doing this, but please, ladies, do not do sit-ups to get rid of belly fat. We cannot choose where we get rid of fat through exercise. When we do exercise, we burn calories and we lose it not where we want to generally, and we put it on not where we want to generally, but you cannot spot reduce fat. So you do not do sit-ups to get rid of belly fat. It will build the muscle, but that's just going to make the fat stick out further because there's more muscle there. So we want to do exercise. If we are doing exercise for the sake of trying to create a calorie deficit, we want to do things like squats, which build big muscle groups, which we've got more muscle mass there, which burns through the calories faster, and we're burning more calories as we go. The reason I'm hesitating as I talk is because I hate talking about doing exercise for the sake of burning calories. I think as soon as we de-link exercise and burning calories, we will all be happier people and will actually enjoy our exercise more. But if you are doing it for the sake of it, I would be doing squats to burn my belly fat. In terms of other exercise that we can do to support us in terms of trying to change those insulin pathways, we can improve our insulin sensitivity with very short, high intensity exercise. So I'm not talking of circuits class or something where you're just kind of keeping on going with some hard stuff. It's basically just a cardio session. We're talking proper high intensity, the kind of high intensity where you're only doing it for maybe 20 seconds and you need a good few minutes to rest in between. Again, I'm going to go into this in more detail tomorrow, in the session tomorrow, and you have to make sure you're doing this carefully in terms of making sure you warm up properly, making sure you're doing exercises that are suitable for you, but doing some really short, high intensity bursts and then recovery, and then again, can help to improve that insulin sensitivity. We also want to do more strength training, partly because, as I said back at the beginning, we're reducing or we're losing muscle mass as we go through menopause. So we want to do strength training to try and maintain that muscle mass for our health and longevity, but also because we can store glycogen in our muscles. And if we can store it in our muscles, then it doesn't have to be stored as fat. So we're kind of creating extra reservoirs of where we can store the carbohydrate, which is turned into glycogen, so it doesn't need to be stored as fat. So building in that strength training can really, really help. In terms of the diet, kind of talked about that already, but just to add, I would not be fasting. I wouldn't be fasting ever, but I definitely wouldn't be fasting during exercise or before exercise. Instead, we want to prime our system with a little bit of protein before we start training, and then making sure we're getting, as menopausal women, about 40 grams of protein and some carbohydrates post-training, but making sure we're fueling our training as we go. There's loads of stuff out there. But even so, Mindy Peltz is one of the sort of, she's Fast Like a Girl book and podcast. She's a big advocate of fasting through menopause. I disagree with her on lots of levels, but even she was doing a podcast the other day with Stacey Stims, who I also disagree with on quite a lot of stuff, but Stacey Stims is kind of the queen of doing strength training and fueling your training, and Mindy Peltz was agreeing with Stacey Stims that we need to fuel our training. So please, please, please don't fast, particularly in terms of that belly fat, because as I said, your body is thinking, I've got to do this, I haven't got enough energy coming in, I'm going to have to store it, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. Okay, I'm just checking through questions. I think Alice, I hope I've answered the question with what I already said to Sarah. Next question, this is coming in from Instagram. How early should we start taking HRT once we're in our 40s? Do you know of any disadvantages of taking it too early? So it's one for your GP. It's absolutely one you need to be speaking to your GP about. They're not going to prescribe it for you until you have symptoms. So it's not a matter of saying, I think I should take HRT because I'm coming up to perimenopause and therefore I want to start taking it. It's, do I have symptoms that HRT will help to relieve? So that's number one. when you start taking it is because of the symptoms that you're experiencing, and that HRT is seen as appropriate response for those symptoms. In terms of disadvantages of taking it too early, there is a health risk of any medication we take. You know, any medication has side impacts. We used to think that HRT was the devil and it was going to give us breast cancer and blood clots and everything. And now we know that's a very small risk. It's still a risk, but it's a very, very small risk. And I would say the risk of, if you're experiencing symptoms that are stopping you from exercising and things, those risks are far higher. But there is still a risk of taking HRT, as there is with any medication. So taking it earlier, I guess, means you're exposed to that risk for longer. As with any medication, you should only be on a medication as long as you need to be on it. So again, I hope that answers that. Shout if that hasn't quite answered that, but I would start taking it when I need it, and I would take it up until I didn't need it anymore. Curly Locks says, this is helpful as I have a home baked cake in the kitchen right now and I'm drinking water and I'll start a giant puzzle I brought years ago. So brilliant. So yeah, I said the water because our water's 75%, whatever it is. Our brain is 75% water, but also often when we think we're hungry, actually we're just thirsty. So always add in that pause while you think, why am I hungry? Why am I craving this? Is there something else that would solve it? Drink a glass of water, and often you'll find that that solves it anyway. So I'm going to keep going through other questions I got in advance. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please do shout. And if you have shouted and I haven't heard it, it's because they're not coming through to me here. So get on Instagram and ask on there, because those are definitely coming through to me. So next question was from, I always forget, sorry, Cherry. I can never remember how to pronounce your name. I think it's Kerry. I love this question. How do we just get out the door? And I think this is a problem for everybody all the time. It's one of the things I work on most with clients, but particularly when we get to menopause, when we're experiencing that fatigue, when we're going, oh God, it's just going to hurt. Everything hurts. I've got no energy. I've given up on my goals because everything feels unachievable. Why am I even bothering? And a million other things that I'm sure you can add in there. So I would always say, if you're trying to achieve something, you need to know why you're trying to achieve it. So why are you doing it? And not because I said you should do some strength and conditioning. It's got to be meaningful to you. So she said, get out the door. So I'm imagining we're talking running here. It could be anything, but let's give the example of running. It's got to be meaningful for you. Why are you doing that run? And again, I would try and make it positive. If it's just about, I want to burn calories, that's not motivating. Think about the benefits to you. Almost anybody I've ever worked with, if I say to them, how did you feel when you got back from the run? They go, oh yeah, I felt better. I felt mentally better. I felt physically better, whatever. So think how you're going to feel at the end. Are you training towards something? It doesn't have to be a race, but it might just be that you want to be able to, be more fit when you're running for the bus, when you're playing with the kids, whatever it is. So make it meaningful for you. Paint a visual picture of what this is working towards, how it is helping you to achieve something, and how you will feel after doing it. Make it achievable. So, if you're training for a marathon and you can't even run to the end of the road, rather than thinking about the marathon, that feels so distant and impossible. Think, this week, I just wanted to achieve a goal of doing 10 minutes, or the first week on the Couch to 5K plan or whatever. So yes, you want that long-term vision, but you want something that makes it feel achievable and more understandable now. So make it more achievable. Then know what your blocks are. So I'm guessing from your question that there's a lot of blocks stopping you getting out that door. Know what they are, know what your mind is saying, and be aware that it's going to come up with those objections and be ready to challenge it. So for example, on running at this time of year, number one that I'll hear is it's too cold. Number two is it's too dark. So on the it's too cold, and we all do this, I do this 100% as well, but you'll be going, oh, I've got to go for a run, but it's so cold outside. Remember, it is only cold for the first 5 minutes. Once you're out there, it's absolutely fine, unless it's sub-zero. But once you're out there, you're probably going to be too hot. So just remember, you need to take a layer that will keep you warm, but you don't want to be warm enough when you first leave the house, because you'll be boiling hot afterwards. So take enough layers, gloves, sleeves that you can just roll down, whatever it is. Maybe if you're doing a long run, and it's really cold, you take a tiny little backpack that you can just shove layers into as you get warmer, buff on the head. All those things can really help keep you warm when you first leave the house, but it is not going to be that cold for the whole time. So our mind will always come up with the biggest barrier that is there to meet us as soon as we start doing whatever it is we're struggling with. Visualize through to the end. Visualize the fact that when you went out last time, you weren't too cold by the end. You weren't too cold even after the first 5 minutes, that you actually enjoyed it, that you saw the sunrise, whatever. So find those positives. Know what the barrier is. Once you start saying it out loud to yourself or write it down, you'll actually go, oh, that's a bit silly. Don't just bat it away. Actually say, okay, so what can I do about that to get rid of that objection? Because it will still be there tomorrow unless you have a whole list of reasons to overcome that objection. And then prepare in advance. So you've chosen to go for a run tomorrow. Think of everything you need to do to get out the door. So you're anticipating all those barriers, whether they're in your mind or whether they're logistical. So get your kit out in advance. So there's no faffing around trying to find it. Remember, you need gloves and all those extra layers. Plan a route if you need to plan a route. Choose a playlist if you need to choose a playlist. Find your headphones. All those things that are going to be those tiny little barriers that add up and suddenly, oh, I haven't got enough time. But also every single decision mounts up, so you end up with this kind of decision fatigue. Do the decisions in advance when you're not trying to get out the door. Make an agreement with some friends to meet them, because then you've got to do it. You've got this thing that you've got a set time you're going to meet them. Know what time you need to be out the door to know what time you need to be back to get on with the rest of your day, so you can't do that, oh, run out of time. Know what time you need to leave. So setting in some process in advance, visualizing all those steps, so you've got rid of all of those barriers, and as I say, all the barriers your mind's going to come up with, finding answers. And if you don't make it out the door tomorrow, make sure it doesn't just turn into oh, I'm so crap, I didn't get out the door, but work out why. What did your mind come up with, or what were the actual logistical barriers? Make a plan to overcome them tomorrow. And then when you've decided, so you're still planning to go for this run tomorrow, don't just have it as I'm planning to go for a run. I am going for a run. Commit to yourself with intention. So often I'll talk to my clients and they'll say, yeah, I'm hoping to do blah, 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 blah. Hoping to do doesn't mean I intend to do. So make that commitment to yourself, go through the barriers, and then get out the door. If on the day your mind is now saying, oh, I'm so tired, I can't do it. As I say, we need to listen to our bodies. We need to respect if it is too tired, but generally we feel fine once we get going. So make a commitment that you will do the first 10 minutes. And if it still feels too hard in those first 10 minutes, then that's fine. You can go back, but at least you've got that daylight into your eyes and everything, all those benefits for the first 10 minutes. If it feels too hard, make it easier. If you're worried in advance, or if in reality it feels too hard, make it easier. I'm a massive fan of run walk. Don't just run. Add some walks in. Start with a walk warm up. Make it easier so that you can't then come up with it's too hard. And then you build from, because if you get the session done, you're getting fitter, which is helping to make it easier in the long run. Not doing the session is definitely going to make it harder in the long run. Just checking if we've got any other questions coming in. Lucy, so I am getting questions from Facebook. That's brilliant. Lucy says, I feel so defeated as I've gone backwards. How do you get your mojo back? Lucy, if you're still watching now, shout, is that you've gone backwards in training, like that side of things, or just kind of mood wise and everything? And then I'll come back to that one. But if you can be a bit more specific as to where you've gone backwards, and then I will try and answer that one. Right, a few more questions that I've got in advance, but do keep those questions coming in. Srividya says, how can I use exercise and food to increase my concentration and energy levels? So energy levels, I hope that I've covered enough already. We want that constant energy rather than spikes. So we don't want high sugars. We don't want refined carbs. Instead, we want things with protein, with high fiber, or not high fiber, with fiber in there. We want water. Other things you can look at in terms of supplements or from your diet. Omega-3s, we should be getting a good amount of omega-3s into our diet anyway. If you eat fish, if you eat oily fish a few times a week, you're ticking that one off. You don't need supplements. If you're vegetarian or you don't like oily fish, you might want to have supplements instead. Omega-3s are essential for loads and loads of different things. So it's not just for brain health, but there's a lot of evidence to show that it is linked to brain health as well. So getting your omega-3s balanced can really help. And then the other thing, creatine phosphate, which is really big in the weightlifting world. Increasingly, there's studies showing that it can help in terms of cardio training as well. But there's more and more evidence showing that creatine phosphate is really linked to brain health. It can be quite important after a brain injury, a concussion or something. But particularly for menopausal women, there's growing research to show that it can make a big difference in terms of brain fog. When you are doing it from a muscle building point of view, you do a whole preloading thing, you've got to get 20 grams and it can be quite hard on your stomach. If you're doing it just as a maintenance thing, 3 to 5 grams a day generally isn't too hard on your stomach, but you don't have to have it all in one go. So if you are finding it's hard on your stomach, you can sip it throughout the day. Those, as well as the things that I've already talked about, should help in terms of the energy, but also that brain fog, that side of things. Let me go back and see what Lucy has said. Training. So Lucy says she's feeling so defeated as she's gone backwards. Feels very familiar to me as well, Lucy. How do you get your mojo back? So one of the biggest things that I really want to get across, that I work with my clients on, is working with ourselves to get the best out of ourselves, working with our mindset. If our mind is saying, oh, I've gone backwards, I'm not good enough, I'm, self-critical, or spending the time staying in that negative space, it's a really negative space and it's a really hard space to be. It's natural, and we all go there. If we're experiencing, particularly if you can see your training's gone backwards, of course you're going to be upset about that. We talk about the stages of grief, of course, but if we just stay there and constantly compare ourselves to the person we used to be, we're not going to help ourselves. If instead we try to move towards accepting that there's been changes, there are hormonal changes happening to our body, and therefore what we used to do won't necessarily work again, because we've got different hormones impacting on all levels of our body. So instead, I talk about it, and I wrote a blog about this, which can try and share. But I wrote a blog about, it was literally for me about getting to know my body again, treating my body as if it was a new person, a new client, and getting to know it from scratch and then building up. So everybody's different. I can't make generalized recommendations for you, Lucy, but working out what your body can take and building up from there, trying to get away from comparing ourselves to our former self, but saying, this is where I am now with not new hormones, but different hormones, and I can work from here to build up. Trying to be patient, it's really hard, but trying to be patient and take those steps, building in the greater recovery, probably more focus on the strength and conditioning, the mobility, the stability, and everything to support our body, and listening to our body, which is the hardest thing. We're used to just bulldozing through, and we used to be able to do everything, get away with it. We need to learn to listen to our body better, whether that's just seeing how we feel, whether that's using things like HRV. These are all things I'm going to talk about in a lot more detail tomorrow. But so number one, working with your body, starting where you're at, building up from there. Number two, being kind to yourself. The sooner we can learn to talk to ourselves like we talk to a friend, and be kind to ourselves and work with ourselves, the easier that process then becomes. In terms of getting the mojo back, finding the small wins. So seeing the progress we make. If you have a training diary, you can look and you can see that progress that you're making. So, and again, rather than comparing, oh, I used to be able to do X, Y, Z, I put a post up the other day, 2 years ago, I just finished an ultra cycle race. I'd cycled, I can't remember what, almost 300K in a day. I'd cycled 6,000 meters of climbing and stuff. I cannot imagine doing anything like that right now. My body would not allow me to, and my training hasn't built up to that. But I can still celebrate the small achievements I get. My FTP is 50 watts lower than it used to be. FTP is a measurement of our cycle fitness, but I can still, today I got it up by 4 watts. I did test, it went up by 4 watts. That is progress from where I was. So taking account of those small wins, knowing I've got achievable goals now. Hopefully, I have signed up to an Ironman next year, but hopefully they're achievable. And so I can feel that progress towards it. I hope that helps, Lucy. It's something I'd love to talk to you about in more detail. If you want to book in a call, or if you sign up for Menopause Week and you enter, and there's lots of coaching prizes to win throughout the week. So it's maybe something we can talk about in more detail. But yeah, I hope that helps. Right. Going back, I think that was most of my questions, and we're just coming up to the hour, so that's perfectly timed. Let me just double check. So let me just kind of wrap up, and then I'll see. So if you've got any other questions, please do pop them in. Let me change that ticker there. There we go. So in terms of, and can I just hide that one? Oh, Lucy, thank you. I hope that helps. So on to wrapping up. As I've said quite a few times, this is part of a whole menopause week. I've been sort of scratching the surface. I'm going to go into more detail on different issues throughout the week. So tomorrow I'm looking at training, how we can get the best out of our training, lots of the things I've talked about today, but going into a bit more detail on training through menopause. That's at 12:30 tomorrow. On Thursday at 7 p.m, I'm doing nutrition and menopause. And then on Friday at 12:30, doing mindset, rest and recovery. That's the kind of bit we kind of don't like to do. It's the boring bit. It's probably the most important bit. If you can't attend them live, that's fine. You need to register for any of them to get the Zoom link to join me. So register. Is that still coming up? Yes. Let me pop the QR code up as well, if that's helpful. So register for the week and you will get all those details through. You'll get reminders of when the events are on, and you will also get recordings. So if you can't make them live, don't worry, you'll get the slides, you'll get the recordings coming through. You will also, almost forgot to say, I'm running a quiz throughout the week. You will get a clue in each of those sessions. There's 4 clues. You need 3 of the clues. You need the answer to 3 of the clues to enter. It's a triathlon themed clue. Today, we're starting at the beginning of the triathlon, which is swimming. So your clue today is goggles. So you just need to note down the word goggles, and you'll get other clues throughout the week. And you need to send me an email at the end of the week with at least 3 of those 4 clues to be entered into a prize draw to win Codfield Fit sessions, so my strength and conditioning classes, coaching sessions, can't remember what else, but lots of great prizes. You'll get details if you register. So note down today's clue, it is goggles, and then see the registration details for how to take part in the rest of that. Let me get rid of that. I'm loving the tech. I hope it's all working. Let me check back on Instagram. Camilla, you said, how do I know if I'm perimenopausal? I answered that right back at the beginning, so I'm not going to go through it all again, but really quickly, if you register for the week, then you'll get the recording, so you can see that then. So register for the week, the details are up on the screen now. But in terms of how you know, track your symptoms, track anything, mood, joint pain, stomach issues, your flow if you have a menstrual cycle, energy levels, how you feel in training, all of those different things, and note if there's a change. So it's partly to do with your age. If you're of an age that is likely to be perimenopausal, then you know that's your first clue. But then secondly, tracking your symptoms. There's so many symptoms. I'll be going through those more in detail tomorrow, and it is so hard. As Sarah said, how do you know if it's this or this or this? It's really hard to know. That's where your GP should be able to help, but be prepared to advocate for yourself. You might have a brilliant GP, you might not. If you don't, then all of that list of tracking your symptoms for a good long time, ideally from pre-menopausal, but you know, from now, if that's where you're starting, will help to give you that evidence. So yes, Sarah said the Balance app has a good symptom tracker. It does. My only issue with it is it's quite hard to then download it if you then want to go to the GP and say, here's all the things. But yeah, find an app, find a notebook. I just have a document on my laptop, and I make sure every Monday I just log in and add on anything new on there. But yeah, find what works best for you. And Alice says, will there be opportunities to ask questions during sessions this week? Yes, so there'll all be Zoom sessions. They'll begin with me talking at the beginning, and then as we go through, if you've got questions either coming up relevant to what I'm asking, you can ask them as we go, or I'll try and make sure that there's time for questions at the end. So yes, absolutely. If there's so yes, join during the week, Alice, and then you'll be able to ask those questions. So that is no questions on Instagram. I'm not entirely sure where the camera. Oh yes, no, I understand. Sorry, I keep on looking up and seeing myself looking up. I've got different screens going. But anyway, let me check if there's anything coming in from anywhere else. I don't think so. So I think that is all the questions. There is your URL to register for the Menopause Week. If you have any other questions, as Alice has just asked, yes, you can ask them during the rest of the week. I would love to see you in those sessions. If you can't join live, then you'll get the recording, so make sure you register anyway. Lovely chatting with you all, ladies. I never know quite how to end this. I think I just clicked this button. So hopefully, love chatting with you. I hope that was useful. If you've got any questions, any feedback, please do share. I forgot to say as well, if you want to increase your chance of winning in that prize draw, if you share on social media and you tag me, anything you found helpful from the week, how to get your friends to sign up for the week, anything like that, please do tag me, and then you'll get more entries into the prize draw, so long as you actually enter the prize draw. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you, everybody else. It's lovely seeing you. Thank you, Sarah. Glad that the tech worked okay, and I look forward to seeing you for the rest of the week. Take care, everybody.